But this is a car that legitimately had a top speed in the area of 300 miles per hour. And no one here is from the German government, are they?
But I want to make this point. If one guy can design that effectively in his head and construct it while doing a nonprofit for almost nothing, what the heck are our manufacturers doing? What the heck are our politicians doing?
The industries and the constructs that made our society great at one point also become our cage.
You know, Henry Ford was doing a soybean car back when World War II broke out. I mean, he was a brilliant man. You know, he shaped Detroit and the automotive industry and mass production. He saw the value of things like this back in the 30s.
Well, you can make an automobile manufacturer more efficient and more profitable while offering it better products. Basically, just bought yourself a car. And I think that's how you affect the change.
He is an automotive designer, engineer, philanthropist, craftsman, artist, and racing driver, owner of Putsch Auto Media, founder and CEO of Genius Garage Educational Programs, and we have a treat in store. Please join me in welcoming our speaker.
Yes, sir. Perfect. Well, hey guys, hugely honored to be here. Thank you for everybody that made it happen, and a lot of respect for everybody and what they're doing here. Enjoying some of the talks and obviously displays. But let's keep it fun because I am in the world of application where it's quick, dirty, and I think a lot of you engineers might cringe at the adventures I have, but they're going to be fun. I also have a counter here that says it's 40 minutes until cocktail hour, so I will surely not interrupt that. And the clicker. So, composites. I know we're all so deep in the world of actually building things and the science behind it, we kind of forget about what it even is. It's just a word that means putting two dissimilar things together. And that is for the structure of making something that means something. And obviously in coming here and what you saw with the Tucker Carlson clip, I did get to do his show a few months back. Some of you supercar nerds out there may realize that the actual engine and wheel you saw on it were from a completely different build I was doing with the BMW V12, so it didn't relate to the cool composite Omega car that we'll be talking about here shortly. But in regard to application of things that inspired us, I just wanted to make mention of three interesting historic things. You know, Henry Ford in 1941 did his soybean car. I don't know if you guys have all seen this, but it was a tube frame car, much done in the style of the late 1930s, obviously 41 before World War II. But if I'm not mistaken, it was soybean fibers and phenolic resin and such. And the car weighed 2/3 of the others, very efficient. And I believe there is pictures of Henry Ford showing how strong the panels are by hitting it with a hammer. But of course, World War II came around and it wasn't something in production, but that was an early composites car done by a giant, now mostly forgotten. But something else that actually is what, I shouldn't say inspired me to build the Omega car we're going to talk about here shortly, but it's something that meant a lot to me as a adventurous young person who likes cars, and that was Jim Hall and his Chaparral race cars in the 1960s and early 70s. Now, what's fascinating about that, it was Can-Am. A lot of people don't remember what that was, but that was an unlimited racing series in the 60s. Virtually no rules. High horsepower, crazy ideas, aerodynamics, fan cars and all that, sucker cars. But in 1965, he was racing a composite monocoque chassis. That was like the first major one. He was winning Sebring in 1965. That same chassis was used, I believe, won the Nürburgring in Germany with the Chaparral 2D variant and then the 2F. He was also the one that pioneered movable aerodynamic wings that were mounted directly to the uprights and affecting that downforce directly into the wheels. And then later was known for the Chaparral that had the snowmobile engines with the fans brought from the cooling fans of a tank to literally evacuate the air from under the car and suck it to the ground with skirts, making it faster. So it was something that inspired me, and I was looking into that. But that, you got to think about, that was a man that was a mechanical engineering student, and he had oil money, so that helped him go racing when he was young and down in Texas. But he developed a composite monocoque chassis in 65 and won with. It wasn't until the 1980s that Ferrari and Formula One were doing that with their chassis. So that's 20 years ahead of Formula One, effectively. But the other thing that was inspirational for me as a young person was if you think of Burt Rutan. Now, he was really the one that pioneered composites, I think, in aircraft, especially experimental aircrafts. And the reason he did that, and you guys may remember the long EZs. Sadly, that was actually the aircraft that John Denver fatally crashed in. Not a fault of the aircraft, it was a fuel type thing. But they were pusher props. The engine was in the back, the main large wing was swept, had the vertical stabilizers, which also helped make it efficient for lift, and it had a canard at the front, which made it far more efficient in its design than a conventional aircraft. But that he was utilizing wood, polyurethane foam, which is basically like an insulation foam, and fiberglass. And people that built their own airplanes in the 1970s and 80s could get the plans and build these, and it was amazing. Eventually they got out of the kit building planes, but he also created the Voyager aircraft that his brother Dick Rutan, who was an Air Force pilot, I believe, and Jeannie Yeager, no relation to Chuck Yeager, his wife, they circumnavigated the globe unrefueled in the Voyager in the 1980s, which was an unbelievable feat. These are all fantastic moments of composites and the application of. So it's daring and exciting, but I just kind of want to do that lead-in with you guys. But before we get to the Omega car, I want to tell you some of my fun little builds and lead-ins there. Let's see if I do this right. Usually I just yell at a camera on YouTube. So thanks for having me here. But racing is a huge love of mine. I actually created a 501c3 educational charity back in 2013 known as Genius Garage. And the whole point of that was, and frankly the inspiration was, when I was in college, I frankly hated my college experience. It was a vacuum. I didn't feel that we had the opportunity to really learn at the level that people were at. We didn't really build anything. We didn't do anything in the real world. There was no good mentorship. And I actually majored in industrial design within fine art, which I could joke about a bit here and there, but there's some value to that. But I spent all my time at Center for Automotive Research with all of my engineering friends doing high-level technical engineering and fabrication, everything from TIG welding titanium to laying up composites. We're in college and competing and such. But I saw what I felt was wrong with the American educational system and what I could do to change that. I felt that the young people need an opportunity to do something more in the real world with real-world mentors, with real challenges outside of the academic vacuum. And for me, it was a bold way to do it, but that's how you get things done. I wanted to give them an experience where they have the best mentors and do something so big in the real world that they couldn't be ignored. Their resume would immediately go from the bottom to the top of the pile, and I was happy that the formula did in fact work.
And actually what you're looking at here is the Lotus Exosphere T125 chassis. That car was actually the one with John Lacey and Jeremy Clarkson on Top Gear. I think it was the top 3 fastest cars around the track. The only cars that beat it were the Renault F1 car, and I think it's Volkswagen Pikes Peak Hillclimb. But that was one of our cars that we ran at Tunis Garage. We used some brilliant young people that I was mentoring, and we raced that at Road America for the big event in July. Some other Formula One cars and such and did well. It hasn't called the electronics on it, sadly. But just an example of composites and how far they can go with, as you guys know, with the carbon fiber monocoque chassis, all of the aerodynamics and darn near the whole darn car except for the drivetrain there. The next one with Genius Garage, obviously loving racing. Here's a great example. This is one of only 2 Riley 122 Daytona prototypes with the BMW V10. There's some show modern motorsports. This is also what I work with the students in Genius Garage. So maybe you guys get an idea of the level of stuff that we do together and why they really get paid attention to when they're now only a 21, 22-year-old kid going out there for a job. In fact, if you look at the right of that screen, you see a young man wearing a kind of an olive-colored backpack. I invited him back, a nice young man, big into working on Porsche 944s, and he was just brilliant in terms of practical engineering. And I had him come back specifically to be the crew chief for both of those cars that weekend, because it's a tall order, and he was up to the task in being the leader of his own peers as well. And sadly, in the last year, on 10, you forgive me, I know we got 33 minutes for a cocktail hour, so I'm making it boring. Anyway, the last year has been brutal for young men and women coming out of engineering, getting jobs, especially if it's anything relating to military contract, aerospace, et cetera. At least that's the experience I've seen with others. And this young man, I have to give him a lot of credit. Frankly, he's the best student I ever had. Of 100 of the best engineering students from around the country in the last decade, I'd say he's the best. Well, there's no jobs. He was working at all these as a manager, and all of the stories that you can imagine from doing so. And I frankly wanted him to come up and work with me on a project, but I also wanted this young man to, get up and able to do it. So, fortunately, by nature of me being a YouTube personality and figure, one of my fans actually worked at Lockheed Martin, and we were talking about it, told him about it. He said, actually, I've got access to seeing jobs on the coast of Coverdale. I said, well, this is the best kid I ever had. Here's where it is. I'm going to give you a resume. So, long story short, he ended up getting the job on his own, but he ended up getting 2 interviews. And they said to him in the interview, even if we like somebody and they're the right person, it's still going to take a couple of weeks for HR to get a hold of you. But they talked about Genius Garage and his experience with the things he did, basically the whole interview, which is what I hear all the time. So what you see here is a picture of one year we built a Sapo camel bike, 9 different. But anyway, had that interview, they talk about Genius Garage all the time. It's practical experience with what we did. And the next day, he gets a phone call. We're sending it to Composites. And it was, hi, so-and-so from Lockheed Martin. I just want to ask you and see if you had an opportunity to review the job offer we sent you on your email. It was the next day. So he is currently employed at Lockheed Martin. I'm very proud of that. But there are many stories just like it. I do also want to point out that Genius Garage, while it's a perfect 501c3 educational program, this has been done and supported entirely by private automotive enthusiasts. There's been no support from the government, no support from anything in the American educational system or higher education or even corporations. Because I'll be honest, maybe it's a little negative, but they don't get it. And they're not thinking of the future and really pushing the ball forward, but we are, and it matters. So I'm very proud of her. So that was not a me take, it's a matter of fact. And I think that also goes to say that people, when they really care, they can actually go out and do something in the real world, even if our industries aren't thinking of it yet. So here's another nice photo with some of the students that were the race team that year. So that's back in 2017. But we have a mid-1990s Indy car from the Pete Nash. They're best there, Reynard in the front. We have a V8 over a Le Mans prototype from the 90s and the 1980s. 2-trunk Corvette. But also all wonderful centerpieces for curriculums and building and hands-on engineering and development, understanding, and then building racing. So not only is it a lot of fun, but they get a lot of first-hand experience, and then also the teamwork experience in hierarchy. And then how do you work through difficulties when the goop hits the fan? But most with Genius Garage, I like doing that, but on my own, I like to do my own kooky fun projects as people do when they're creative. And here's another one. So the year of Genius Garage, with the students you saw, they were having a good time building the Sapo Camel bike link that we showed at Oshkosh one year. I got to thinking, back to the 1980s, I guess, SC Johnson Wax sponsored, it is Paul McCree, I think, to do a cap-scale flying model of a pterosaur, the Quetzalcoatlus morphropi species. So I wanted to build a full-scale flying one to an average estimate of the wingspan, which is 38 feet, well, about 11 meters. So obviously composites used throughout that. The leading edge of the wings effectively were considered basically the hinking fin bone, if you look at anatomy, was the leading edge of the wings, and then the pteroid bones was effectively what our thumbs would be to control the little flash of skin here on the animals. So I simply used that and the ability for sailboat racing. Found a sailmaker that wouldn't think I was a total kook when I wanted to stitch in some dinosaur wing membranes. And this is testing it just out of ground fact off the back of the truck, but just neat things that can be shown with creativity, and obviously the infinite possibilities we have in possible to create. But largely I did this just because I wanted to do it. I thought it would be cool. I wanted to see actual wing membrane flex and replicate something that there's no codes. These things died out at the late Cretaceous era.
So looking at fossils, considering the dynamics of other living animals that have flexible wing membranes and building something like that's really great. And that's a really fantastic way to inspire young engineers, both the ones that I'm mentoring on the program that year, as well as on the internet, social media and such. But just a few other fun pictures here of it before we get into the Omega cars. It's sitting on the ground, taking up the whole parking lot. Now, originally I had a fun idea. I like to get creative and silly, because if you're not having a good time engineering, what are we doing? That's my Dodge Viper there. And I originally thought, I should tether this to the back of the Dodge Viper like a kite. And if I have control lines in it like a stunt aircraft and somebody riding it, we can just control it with the Viper and run up and down a runway and turn. I kind of scratched that because I thought I'd end up destroying my entire model. I'm glad I did and use the big truck with the landing platform. But I was having fun with that. And then I was like, well, let's just put it on top and take some pictures. And that's when I realized it's a bad idea to launch a giant flying dinosaur off the back of your Dodge Viper, which is normal. Everybody has that problem, but that's that. So the next thing's fun. Let's skip ahead a couple here. I think you might be seeing some cool things because you're going to recognize something real quick. You guys recognize that? Yeah, that's the 1989 Michael Keaton, Tim Burton Batmobile, except this one I built. It's an exact replica in terms of its size and shape and all that. Obviously, it's another great place where composites can be utilized inexpensively. This is very classic, typical fiberglass chop gun type way. It's been used to make boats and such. But I actually ended up having access to molds that came off one of the original cars, and I took it a little further, and you may have noticed the engine. Let me get forward. Pardon me. Yep, there it is again. A large car, had a 130-some inch wheelbase, kind of like that big dually pickup truck. There's the cockpit, but there's the engine. That is a Boeing turboshaft engine out of a Vietnam-era drone anti-submarine helicopter. And that's fun to say, but basically it ended up being one that I could get my hands on for a reasonable amount of money. It was a reasonable size, weight, and the output shaft spun the right direction. Its usable RPM range was 0 to 6,000 RPMs, just like a normal car engine. So my creative juices were flowing that year, and I built that as a Batmobile to make it extra fun. And the beautiful thing about being a car guy in the United States and hot rodding, I cut up a 1980 C4 Corvette to use the suspension and bulkheads and the differential and the transmission. And the beautiful thing about doing that is I can sell all the stuff I don't need and keep the title. So actually this vehicle, complete with an engine that idles at 20,000 RPMs, Simfire 30 caliber machine guns that are powered by an onboard oxygen and propane tank and suspension and all that. That to an insurance company is a modified 1985 Corvette. And they never hassled me. I never got pulled over. But if you look on the side below the machine guns, those oval openings, those are actually the exhaust. It was quite hot. In fact, there is a YouTube video. If you dig deep enough, you can see me with a swept hilt rapier of the Renaissance era and some marshmallows from the cockpit roasting marshmallows. I don't advise it. It does have a bit of a tang of Jet A fuel. But that was a lot of fun. So the Omega car. Well, this is the one that I was honored to be able to speak about on Tucker Carlson's show a few weeks back. Now, aside from anything relating to politics, it was really nice, and I really enjoyed my time with him. He's exactly the same person off camera as on. And it was a really great opportunity to just talk about industry and where we are as a nation in that regard. There's a couple tiny just points relating to this politically, but what sparked me to build this car was actually back in 2008. And I'll say this the most respectful way I can. Can we all agree that probably the biggest thing Washington, D.C. needs is one giant manure shovel? Is that fair to say? Well, there was a person running for president back then making big claims about how he was going to retool Detroit. So the fuel-efficient and energy-efficient cars of tomorrow built here for the sake of the United States and the world. And I was watching thinking BS. And a few years into it, after our financial crisis, and of course we had to bail out, obviously with General Motors and such, Ford I think did a bit better and such, but I was looking at, the vehicles in dealership lots, and I'm seeing muscle cars and big trucks, and that's great. I love muscle cars and big trucks, but that's not what this gentleman who became president said we were going to do. And so I remember vividly riding my motorcycle around Columbus thinking about it. And, if any of you work on old cars, you probably had to push one once or twice. They don't push too easy. And I was just thinking of how insanely inefficient that is. Well, I mentioned to you about Jim Hall's Chaparral race cars in the 1960s. Well, I was just for fun kind of researching all the materials and techniques he used to build those, because frankly, I'd love to replicate one day and have fun with that. But then when I was doing more research on material sciences and thinking about what's available out there, I go, well, hold on. There's a myriad of ways I can build a car, set up for mass production, lower environmental impact, lower energy and, mass production, more fuel efficient. And I'm like, I got to build a car. So what this is, it's turbo diesel. Actually, it uses an ALH variant from Volkswagen, early 2000s, because that was readily the most efficient diesel engine I could easily get in the United States. And the reason I powered it, the concept by diesel, rather than making it electric or hybrid was, what I saw missing in the automotive industry was we don't make cars efficiently at all. Forget the drivetrain. I don't care what it's powered by. You can use different drivetrains for different uses in parts of the world. But the actual vehicle is not remotely efficient. Just the amount of things that create drag on it, the weight, how we produce it, the toxicity to produce, the expense to produce, what comes time when we have to recycle it. I know it works well. It's been tried and true for our industry, but we can do better. And I actually said on Tucker Carlson's show, I said, it was 1958 and 1959, CIA, through Skunk Works, was developing the SR-71 Blackbird. It was a titanium aircraft in the late 50s that could fly over Mach 3 sustained. And before GPS could pinpoint the stars through broad daylight and clouds to know where it is on Earth and then map hundreds of thousands of square miles of the Earth's surface, we're still building cars with stamped steel boxes like we started doing in the 1930s. Obviously we've gotten better at it since then, but come on. And then just being a car guy, as you can see maybe from this next picture. Let's see here. Come on. The next picture. Here we go. Fun things in the back. We all like fun cars. We love the art. We love what's building there. And I think every young man and woman is the same. We want cool cars. Problem is we usually can't afford them. So you got to build it. And that's where I went with that, because if you look at vehicles today, especially trucks, they're ridiculously expensive. People are financing, and everybody's just ending up upside down. They massively depreciate. They don't last. So, back in the 1980s when I was a kid, I remember, my dad had a diesel Rabbit pickup truck, tremendous mileage, small car. But why are we going so far down a road that makes no sense? So I wanted to build this to simply remind the world of what's possible. Now, I do want to point out a few things, because you're all very bright. I know you're all trying to figure out what this is and how it's built. That's not a body on a chassis. You're looking at the chassis. It's a monocoque. And I made it in such a way, in thinking of it, that one would be massively positive in energy absorption in the nature of impacts, for obviously considering it in crash. And if it's a monocoque, how do you fix it? You're not just bolting on different fenders and pieces, because if you wreck a car nowadays, they're pretty darn complicated to fix, and they're never right. So what if we fix them in a totally different way? What if when it comes time to recycle it, you can bring it down to its original materials much quicker with less toxicity? And politically they've been pushed largely to, as well, the nature of electric vehicles for reasons of no emissions at the car. But how do we produce the electricity? Which I'm going to get to in just a second relating to this. How do we produce the electricity? What's the carbon footprint of that? What's the carbon footprint of manufacturing an electric vehicle? What's the carbon footprint of manufacturing a normal ICE car? Well, I can tell you this. I wanted my carbon footprint, I wanted my energy to build a car from the ground up to be less than all of them. I also wanted it to be affordable. Why are people buying like the cheapest reasonably cars you can find are $30,000, $40,000? Trucks are $50,000 to $100,000. That's insane. If you're gonna spend $50,000 or $100,000, buy a used Ferrari. It might appreciate. At least I know that's easier said than done, but it's tongue-in-cheek kind of fun way to do it, of course. But going a little bit beyond this, so this car I actually built back in 2012 and 2013. Well, it's been a little while since then, obviously. So why has it been so long? Well, I got the vision, I had to do it, and I did it. Funded it myself. I showed it at one fancy exotic car party. It was a hangar party, mostly, car pals that drive their Ferraris and Lamborghinis and stuff. And I did a little talk about it, probably talked too long and bored some of them. And then I realized, like I said on Tucker, I didn't have a voice. Nobody knows this. Nobody's going to care if I don't have a voice. And I ended up I was kind of exhausted from building that and building and mentoring all these students with the nonprofit for a year. I just parked it in my garage for basically a decade. And I spent all my time building that nonprofit and mentoring all these students. I'm happy to say that I was acknowledged by both the Trump administration and the Biden administration. I both got Lifetime Achievement Awards in education for it, but the truth is that doesn't keep the lights on. That doesn't help any students be there, and not one student has ever had to pay to be there. And I thought that was important because I wanted to select young engineers and mentor them only what's based in their heads and their hearts, not because of their last name, not because of the financial horsepower of the family, and not because some checklist some politician came up for said I've got to have people that meet certain demographics, only because they're right people. Interesting enough, they're all different, and it's matter, but that's what I did for a decade. And yes, that made it much more difficult for me to make a living and do my own thing. But what's happened over the last few years, I don't know if you've all noticed, but have you noticed the world has gone crazy politically in general? I don't know if you're on X, I would suggest avoiding it. things of this nature. And last year, there's a lot going on. And if you notice, there was, of course, electric vehicle mandates being proposed and pushed, both of the state of California and also the Biden administration. And we'd like to think that's all in the best interest of everybody. But I have a problem with major industry mandates, regardless of what they are. Because when you have a government mandate that things have to be done a certain way, you do one thing: you destroy innovation. Last time I checked, I don't think any of these politicians know how to change their own oil, let alone build a car or know what's best for the rest of the country, respectfully. So last year, I thought to myself, I have to finish this car and I have to get some numbers, and it's time for me to make a statement and just put it out there. Which weirdly enough may be easier for a guy like me that's had to be kind of out in the woods, so to speak, of engineering and trying to forge my own civilization. You know what I mean? Because I think it's difficult because people nowadays are so afraid to speak out with their thoughts, what they believe in, and push forward. So I don't necessarily think of myself in any way as brave of doing that, just as in like, hey, it's just another day and trying to make it out there in the world, So I tested it. Okay, well, when I built this, I realized that people understand miles to gallon, they understand 0 to 60, and they understand how much something costs. Those are the three things I care about. And when you saw that clip, which is actually fascinating that Tucker's people put that together, I was just in the last few days. I was wearing that funny fedora hat and suit in front of some steam locomotives. I said it'll do over 100 miles a gallon, it'll do 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds. It's not that hard to know something will do that if you know about what its rolling resistance is, coefficient of drag, weight, what drivetrain you're using. You're gonna know those things, but it does surprise people. It's kind of fun to call it years ago and wait. So I tested it. It has a aluminum fuel tank in it, so I don't really have to worry about expansion, contraction, or a flexible membrane. So I know how much fuel is going to be utilized in this. And I know some of you guys are going to go real into temperature and density and things like this, but there's, if I may make a joke about engineers, there's a joke that says there's a party, and at the one end of the room, there's an engineer, and at the other end, a male engineer. And at the other room is a beautiful woman who wants to dance. And the construct is, every time you move closer to the woman to dance, you can only move half the distance between you and the woman who wants to dance. And the engineer immediately is in shock and starts to nearly cry because he realized, I'll never be able to get to the woman and dance. And then you realize anybody else would go, I can get close enough. So anyway, close enough. So drove the car, measured distance through the countryside like I normally do when I'm commuting. There's stop signs, there's turns, it's not highway, it's sustained speed. So I tested it with students. They rode along. I measured it with a precise measurement to an exact point. Measured distance right in an area of 20 miles, normal to driving of the commute. Came back, did the math. It was the first test out without the aerodynamic fairings of the wheels and the underside, with zero testing out of the box after it sit for 10 years. The fuel age and the tires are old. It was 104.72 miles to the gallon. Genuine, not highway. Okay, that's a good first start. So the next day, I bought a very nicely precise accelerometers and GPS that can be utilized for doing 0 to 60 times. Actual 0 to 60 times, not a rollout like manufacturers like to try to fudge nowadays. And not under perfect conditions, back-to-back real world. So I took my 1993 Dodge Viper RT10, good old fast American car. Thank you, Bob Lutz. You got to like it when a CEO will still smoke cigars and fly his own light fighter aircraft once in a while. So I appreciate the Dodge Viper existing. Also a C7 Grand Sport Corvette and a Tesla Model 3 with full charge, rear-wheel drive to be fair, and did the 0 to 60s on all of them back to back. This car beat the Dodge Viper by 0.2 of a second and exactly matched the Tesla Model 3 and the C7 2019 Corvette Grand Sport within 1/100th of a second. The Tesla got slightly slower every time it went as the battery went down. And keep in mind that was in my car with nothing optimized, no traction control, nothing. So that did what I said it was going to do back when. But that made me interested. I thought, okay, I've got some basic numbers here. It's diesel. Well, there's got to be numbers from the EPA on what's the carbon footprint of burning 1 gallon of diesel. All right, you can get that number. That's not hard to find. Okay, what's the national average to generate a kilowatt hour of electricity? Okay, that's not that hard to find. National average, it obviously makes a difference if you're burning coal or, you're doing nuclear or wind or whatnot, but national average. What's a carbon footprint of a kilowatt hour? Well, it's not hard to math and find out if you've got something like the Tesla Model 3, you charge at home, goes a distance. You've got a car like this on straight diesel, goes a distance. Turns out, my car has a lower carbon footprint per mile than an EV does, national average United States, charged at home. We have the infrastructure there. The fuel is readily available anywhere. Because there's no batteries to produce, it has a wildly lower carbon footprint to manufacture than an EV. Now, one, I have to point out, I'm not here to vilify EVs in any way. I think they have the place, and I think they're a great thing. I do think it's absurd that politicians want to try to shove them all down our throat for perhaps reasons that they have up their sleeve, but I'm not going to go into that. I just wanted to do this and point that out, to wake up the world and go, hey, maybe it's time we took a step back and looked at how we actually do things. Now, obviously, this is one little prototype car built by a guy in an old leaky Quonset hut, and it probably has less than $30,000 materials in it. The drivetrain I used had about 130,000 miles on it to start, so it was no spring chicken. But I want to make this point. If one guy can design that effectively in his head and construct it while doing a nonprofit for almost nothing, what the heck are our manufacturers doing? What the heck are our politicians doing? Okay, I know there's things like crash testing and emissions and HVAC systems and all that sort of thing. Okay, that's fine. We'll cut the horsepower a little bit. Add a couple of 100 pounds of weight. And that's a 2-seat car, and people don't need that and all that. And yeah, there's no windshield wiper and all. Okay, fine. But also, I put no development in that. That's what it did right out of the box. You're telling me if we didn't put effort into actually building efficient cars that were less costly, more recyclable, better for the environment, better for the people, better for the world, we can't do that? I know we can do that. I just did in a small way. I'm very happy to be able to speak on Tucker about that and also my own YouTube channel. In fact, the whole reason I ended up, by the way, 10 minutes till cocktails. Yes, I'll give you time for questions too. But let's see where the pictures are here. Maybe there's some fun ones. There's a nice young man there. We were posing. I was actually mentoring him in automotive design back when. Very nice young man. But kind of in finalization here, the point is this. Henry Ford was doing a soybean car back when. World War II broke out. He was a brilliant man. He shaped Detroit in the automotive industry and mass production. He saw the value of things like this back in the 30s. Jim Hall with the Chaparral race cars in the 1960s, a guy from Texas, was a mechanical engineering student, had a little bit of oil money to go racing. I'm mostly just jealous. That would be a lot of fun. Really neat guy. He developed composite monocoque chassis that won the 12 Hours of Sebring in '65 and beat Ferrari to composite chassis by 20 years. Burt Rutan, well, he's scaled composites now, if I'm not mistaken, for Richard Branson, building such things. And the Voyager circumnavigated the world in the 1980s on refuel, flown by his brother and his brother's wife on a shoestring. And I'm pretty sure no corporation wanted to sponsor that either because they were all worried about it crashing and being on the news. But it's all these people throughout history that dare to see something and just do it. Even if there's no monetary gain for them right now, because it needs to be done, if for no other reason, to show it to themselves and the world, the good things that are possible and inspire them. I've had no monetary gain from that car that I couldn't have done from doing YouTube. And certainly when you think of the time and money and everything put in that and the dedication, it doesn't come back around, but it needs to happen. And I think it has tremendous value to society, at least just reminding us what we can do with composites, and how will they evolve. But we have to remember, too, that our composites, our material, is in a sense a tool. And they say that, if your own tool's a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. In this sense, it's not necessarily true, but application is, in the end of the day, it's where the rubber meets the road turns. And that's what we need to do. The Genius Graduate Educational Program is something that mattered to me a lot. Yes, it's a little emotional because I didn't like my college experience. I was stymied. I was the person forgotten. I was a person that didn't get to plug in and could have done a lot more. My family worked hard. Okay, I've had a little public golf course that was a business. We worked from 6 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock at night to the season, 7 days a week, no vacations.
Not only did we have to mow the grass and teach lessons and put on the parties and work with the public, we also had to fix the mower and sharpen the rims on the fairway mower and anything like that. So the point of it is, you can't give up. If you see something that you can build and make a positive difference in the world, you have to find a way to do it and never forget it. Now, I had a great conversation with two of the men here with one of their displays. And it's a sad enemy of people or nations or communities or even the future is simply complacency. Well, for me, you know, I went on YouTube to get exposure for the nonprofit I was creating because I don't care. I couldn't get the media to care. I had college students doing an IndyCar and getting unbelievable jobs. They were working at Tesla and Power Out, they're working for the automotive manufacturers, for Marathon, for Lockheed Martin, because of what we did. No one's going to write that. So yeah, I had to go on the internet and shoot my mouth off. Maybe not the nicest thing in the world to do corporate. I would be a folksy, kooky guy, but it's what you have to do to make that happen. And this had to happen too. And yeah, I sat on it for 10 years, but it's got its time. And I'm really genuinely honored to have been invited here to speak with you all. It's a lot of fun. So I just want to say thank you. But we got 6 minutes for questions. Let's have some cocktails, and I'll hang out, have some drinks, and I'll even answer questions in a more entertaining way if you want. But any questions?
Floor is open for questions. Remember, the longer your preface, the longer it is till we get to the reception.
Answer points for funny ones. Any of them? No questions. That's it.
All right, the Corvette C7 Grand Sport.
Yeah, it's in the parking lot, actually.
All right, I may have to talk to you later. C7 track package?
No, it's just a Grand Sport. You can take the top off. It's actually automatic, but it's got ventilated and heated seats, and the Bluetooth connect well, and it's still fast enough to roast about everybody on the road. So,
My daughter can change her oil if you need.
good.
She's 10. She knows how to change all her oil in that car.
Impressive. I like that. Yeah. Anything, guys. Anything funny. Come on. Positive experiences, negative ones. Doesn't even have to be about the car.
Do the machine guns work?
Are you with the ATF?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yes, but no. They're a simfire. They don't have a receiver that you can actually load any kind of cartridge in. It was just it looks just like it. I can go back. Oh, we have a very nice person that can show us that. Okay, so if you have a look at that, the ammunition on the side and the chain, those were all loaded with no powder in it, so they're in there. You can see that. Obviously, there is a tube and a barrel. It's not right, it's not a real barrel. The whole thing is made to look like that. The whole receiver is machined out of aluminum to look like it. And you can see the 2 gas lines, one's red and one's green coming from, one is oxygen, and one is propane. And I have a computer-controlled circuit, a couple of solenoids, and an igniter. So you can, it fills up the combustion chamber and fires at the same cadence as the original Brown 30 calibers would. And then to change the mixture, you simply dial up or down the relationship of the pressures of the oxygen and the propane. If you want a bigger boom, you just kind of down those up. It has a great muzzle flash and gives you the full sound with the exception of having projectile braking sound. And unbelievably, because it's Batmobile, you can actually drive around in public like that and nobody freaks out. So, what else you got?
Thanks, Casey. Appreciate it. It's awesome. You mentioned recyclability about the Omega car. What can you teach us about that?
Well, for the time we have to level, and also for the sake of my IP, the car itself, I utilized numerous composites in it, and also I had to construct it in a way that's something that I could do handmade. Whereas if you consider the car producing it, you have various mold, things like that. But in terms of recyclability, when we're thinking about composites, you have to think, what are the components we're using in? What is effectively the resin, the matrix, the fibers? You know, we can create the structure, but now we need to think about how long does that last? Are we creating a product that's going to be of value to people effectively, definitely, or is this something that's going to be out of fashion in 5 years and fall apart? So we have to think of those things in terms of their life cycle. But also, when the life cycle is over, I don't know if any of you were into boats or sailing, but there's a heck of a lot of fiberglass boats just sitting around, all around the Great Lakes. that's pretty negative. That's a negative problem because what do you do with old fiberglass when you're done? How do you recycle that? So my short answer is we simply have to think about what materials we're using, how do we create them, how long do they last, how long is that product going to be of any value to society realistically, and then what is the end goal going to be? So these are just things we need to think of. Maybe I think maybe we're looking for more specific, but that's the generality of the thinking behind the car. Good to you.
Thanks, Casey, for sharing your dreams with us.
Oh, I'm sorry. Say it again.
Thanks again for sharing your dreams with us.
Of course.
The two questions: where does the name Omega comes from, and what do you have in mind for your next build?
Oh, thank you. And that actually gives me another thought. So, Omega, last thought I agree. Greek alphabet, in a sense, it was most diminutive of those, and it is also the loudest. So, I like it. It sounds good. It's easy to recognize. But also, if I only ever built one car again, I felt that was the most important. So if that was the last one, it's not okay, but that's the one that I've already known for. So my next build, it depends on what shakes out of the tree, so to speak. So the answer is, we'll say, what can I do as an individual on my own with my own resources and power? Not as much as I'd like, but so this is a proof of concept that shows value to, shall we say, the world, manufacturing, thinking of how we create anything from transportation to home goods. I actually kind of want to have a little more fun for my next build, is what forgetting. So I was thinking about it, and Audi built an all-aluminum V12 twin-turbo diesel engine in the 2000s. I don't think it was available in the United States. They also ran into Le Mans. I was looking at that motor, I'm like, stock in an SUV, it makes 500 horsepower and 750 foot-pounds of torque. I'm like, well, shoot, if I just kind of work it in management, similar to how I did this car, build a car a little longer wheelbase, and similarly to this, I kind of wanted to have fun and build my own Omega supercar, maybe I'll call it the Alpha car, for good reason. If I do that with that engine, this will be a car that will still get over 60 miles to the gallon on a diesel. But looking at simply the coefficient of drag and building a chassis, what the engine is, not only can I take it on a road course, a tracker, but this is a car that legitimately had a top speed in the area of 300 miles per hour. And no one here is from the German government, are they? Okay, they're not watching. Okay, so I was fortunate enough for a couple of years ago to purchase a bit of a dream car. It was a US spec car in Germany, and I made friends with the guy who just tore around the Autobahn for a few days. So the fastest production cars going around the Autobahn was 242 miles an hour, and the fastest car on the Autobahn still stands for Mercedes in 1938, I forget, 261 miles an hour. And I was thinking, like, shoot, I did go that far, taking 9 mile and doing miles per gallon stuff. And since it's registered legal in the United States, I can just put on 747, have the temporary drive around Germany, fast forward, and I'm like, you just get up at 5 in the morning and rip south of Frankfurt, and if everything's looking good, nothing's ugly, it'd be kind of fun to be the fastest person ever on the Autobahn. I've had a car that gets over 60 miles a gallon on diesel, and you can crack 250 miles an hour. That might make a million people in here cringe, especially your attorneys in corporate. But these are the things I think of and that were good fun. But something you didn't answer, I'll say in short, my, shall we say, dream or vision, what I'd really like to do is effectively start a materials science startup company. And in developing and working specifically with materials and working on the techniques to create that and how do you mass produce different structures. The beauty of doing that is what you do is you don't simply do that for the sake of IP, you do that while having a vision. And because of my outreach with social media and design and building and implementing, when you've got your engineers and people, students working on these, you're also building products to use on interesting ones, which can be everything from fenders and car parts and aerospace to fully functioning cars, which frankly are worth their weight in gold. This car in the last, I don't know, 6 months alone has been viewed 10, 20 million plus times with zero investment fund. No money, but worth millions in marketing just for building. But anyway, building things like that, building things, looking at the structure stuff you can build for automotive industry, even home goods like avant-garde, interesting furniture, home goods and stuff. And these are all products that can create offshoot companies, home goods, automotive, and some things that start cash flowing sooner or later. Obviously, automotive is where my love is, but affecting the automotive industry in a reasonable, positive way for all, I see as a twofold task. After you do that for a while, and after you create good people know where you're going, and the public's behind it, sees the support, if you take a car to the assembly line, normal ICE car, say 4 doors, something average. Strip it down to its basic unibody, suspension, drivetrain. You lose some of the engine management. You work it over. You work it over with the side on conceptual things you've done, and also your materials and your production techniques. Make something a little more stylish, something that maybe is a little less costly to produce, to where it's just as profitable, if not a little more profitable, while offering your public a better product. Well, that's win number one. Win number two is you look at a modern automobile manufacturer, you do a cost efficiency benefit analysis on the entirety of it, implementing some of your ideas and concepts, your materials ability to, well, you can make an automobile manufacturer more efficient and more profitable while offering it better products. Basically, just bought yourself a car. And I think that's how you affect a change. And that's how you affect change, positive, real world change. It doesn't just exist in a vacuum. We exist in our society. The industries and the constructs that made our society great at one point also become our cage. So it really comes down to the strategy of how do you affect that positively working as well. So that's the goal, and that's the answer part of your question. That says I'm blue over time, so we can make these cocktail questions or we can go again.
I want to thank you so much. Please, let's thank our speaker. Come on,